Hello there, I'm Sconchulus, and this is TEPPEN Deck Tech, where I present to you decks that are fun, strong, or interesting. Sure feels good to say that again. Today we are playing my favorite hero, once again, with the ultimate hero art for Aggro, Ashura Senku. This hero art does three things. First, moving a unit to another lane, while also giving that unit veil and damage immunity. Basically, this lets us guarantee direct damage and protect any unit, potentially making them into a win con. The goal of this deck, then, is to get any amount of damage early and create an unrespondable win condition with one brand new card, Personality Import. This card is basically a reprint of Bolt Reaver's Valor with a few changes, but we are using it to add those exact same two keywords as before, Flight and Agility. We can use import on any of our black units, assuming they will guarantee lethal, but the idea is to use it on the unit in the picture. Everything else in the deck is to enable that game plan, starting with Natural Fanatic and High Altitude Attack, which lets us cycle cards to find import while still maintaining value. These cards also let us effectively punish anytime our opponent is the one to start active phase, regardless of our board. The momentum these cards give us is huge for this deck, particularly High Altitude Attack. This is the card that I always want to be starting games with, and is usually what will let us end them. High Altitude Attack gives +1/+1 and rush to one unit, which is everything to this deck. Buffing in our hand is much safer than something on the field, and rush will give us the choice of guaranteed direct or the ability to assassinate any unit. If you play a rush unit last second in front of a unit with less HP than its attack, you can even get both. It is the best card in our deck, especially if we also open Satsuki, who will fulfill one half of our personality import, but is extremely strong in her own right. I've won tons of games off of the momentum from buffing my first Satsuki, which is why we are also playing 6 buff actions, 1 Psycho Power, and 2 Hunger for Power, which is better than Psycho Power in this deck. You should run 3 of this to save yourself a little more life. I'm just running Psycho Power for the flavor. And 3 Heartless Experiment. This card is 1 MP, which makes it as efficient as possible. I will regularly use this to buff Satsuki's first attack at the last second, but doing so is really risky, since you give your opponent blue MP to stop her in dozens of ways. 1 MP on a 3 MP unit is so efficient though, that the risk will usually be worth it, and if they punish you, you can at least Natural Fanatic. And if they activate something useless, you can activate Psycho Power and win right there with a 6 attack Satsuki attacking direct every turn. This is the second best card in our deck. Regardless of how turn 1 actually goes, we also have Lilith to make our Satsuki plays even stronger, and fulfill the other half of our personality import. Lilith will ping a random enemy for 3 when played, and heal us the same amount. This goes a long way towards evening out all of our sacrifice cards, and lets us potentially deny enemy blockers, or ascend and growth plays if we use her just right. And she immediately puts on pressure. If Lilith has gotten even 1 faith buff, use Senku and hit her with a buff action and you immediately guarantee 5 direct with 5 more coming every time she attacks. This is all assuming you have another demon in hand, which is pretty easy to do since we cycle and play so many units, but it will cause the deck to brick occasionally. Hands where you open 2 demons are really strong, but not necessarily worth trying to mulligan for over, say, hands with Satsuki and High Altitude. Our other demons are Dante, the coolest dude in the deck, and he honestly takes a really long time to come online, and the deck usually wins before that, but he's sick and works perfectly with Ashura Senku, basically letting us assassinate anything with 12 HP or less. You can even buff him with Heartless Experiment to make him a very serious threat. And even without playing him, just having him in the deck makes Lilith much more consistent, so he is very worth playing. And our last demon is Devil's successor Vergil, the poster boy. He's a 5-drop with Agility Faith, and when ascended gets +2/+2 and bounces a 4 MP or lower unit back to the enemy's EX pocket. While the Ascend might not seem like a lot, if you've played against it, you know this effect is devastating. Vergil's Ascend will set our opponent way back and put them in a do or die situation the second we land it. Anytime you draw Vergil, you should basically be looking for the Ascend to end the game right then. Vergil is a crazy win con, and is by far the 3rd best card in our deck. Our remaining cards are Joe C. Kuroda, as well as Cyclock, which actually do basically the same thing, make it easier to ascend Vergil and Seth. We have Tu Fong, who is similar to Lilith, but only pings his lane, making him strictly worse. Still a great card though, and a decent recipient for our high altitude attacks. And lastly, we have our other star finisher, Seth. All that really matters about Seth is his 4 attack baseline when ascended. He just happens to complement everything else about our deck as well. Except his tribe. He could be a human. Combined with high altitude, we can ascend them to win any trade by surprise while getting in lethal if we're greedy, and heal back the life we spent on high altitude in the process. Their death effect does not really matter. The reason we are playing 3 is so we can make those crucial early game plays and still have one ready for when we draw Personality Import. Once our opponent is down to 10 or 12, even 15 life, we can throw Seth down, then Senku and Import and win the game with almost no counterplay. That's what I'm hoping to show off today. Here's the deck QR for you, and with all that said, let's get into it. Game 1, we are up against a high-ranked GDI player. Let's see how our aggro gimmick deck does against a committed red player. Our opening hand contains Dante, which is always a sign of good luck, but no good starter, so we will activate Cyclock and draw right into Satsuki. We will activate high altitude attack, hopefully buffing Satsuki so we can get in our first direct damage on our opponent, which we thankfully do. We will play Satsuki right down, doing 3 damage to our opponent, and they will play Isun right after her second attack. Isun will block a bit of damage and will be destroyed. Our opponent will play Claire Redfield, an extremely dangerous Crush Growth unit. We will ascend Seth over our Satsuki, and our opponent will play Halcyon and Hayabusa, giving 1 shield to Hayabusa by Halcyon's effect. They will play another Halcyon, giving a shield to Claire, and we have played Fong and Lilith, which have gotten in enough direct damage that our opponent is already down to 14 before they even realize we already have our win condition with an there is no card in a red deck that can stop this. We activate Personality Import, Heartless Experiment, our opponent activates Right Arm Momomo, but it's already too late and we take game 1 the exact way I wrote it up on Deck Edit. And we're running it back. Just by luck, I ran into the same player on ladder again on the same deck, so now's my chance to prove it wasn't just a fluke. It's a little harder when someone knows exactly what we're up to. We don't exactly have a good starter, so we'll start off with Fong and activate High Altitude, buffing Seth. It's not Satsuki, but we already have Lilith and Vergil, so we have a pretty strong grip. We'll ascend Seth over Fong while we can, and our opponent will play Claire Redfield and Halcyon, buffing up their Claire Redfield. They'll play Nina down, which could potentially deny any of our later plays once they search their actions with it. They'll play Momo in the top lane, which gives them a very strong board, but we will play Vergil right down and bounce. Unfortunately not Momo, but the Claire is an equally good bounce, and we will try to buff Vergil up so we can get in as much damage as we can while our Ashura is active. They already have both of the actions in their hand, which they will activate. Mjolnir will do 9 damage to Vergil, and Jolt will finish him off, but they are already down to 2 health. We just need 1 more hit in, and we have the perfect way to do it with high altitude. Our opponent will play Crystal Ball, which puts them to 0 MP, and now all we have to do is play Seth, and with no MP to block him, we will take a second game against the GDI player. Let's go! Game 2, we are up against Wesker Ouroboros. Mono Black will probably have a couple more answers for our combo than Mono Red did. Hopefully we don't get destroyed. We will shuffle back an unplayable hand and draw a solid reactive hand. We'll start off with Josie Kuroda and activate Natural Fanatic to make our Lilith even more playable, and we draw a third Lilith off the top. Our opponent will play Alex Wesker, which would be a ton of early pressure if we couldn't Lilith to deny it. We will play Fong, filling up our lane while our opponent charges for Victory's Whip from Ziska. This could be really dangerous for us, reflecting any damage we do to it back to us. We will play Lilith, effectively going neutral on the damage. We will play Satsuki in the middle lane, and our opponent will activate Poison Gas Belt, sending some cards from deck to graveyard. We will respond with Hunger for Power, and our opponent will activate Punishment for Betrayal. We played right into it with only 1/3 attack unit on field. Lilith will be destroyed, and we will play another Lilith to destroy the spent from Ziska on the field. We activate Natural Fanatic, which gives our opponent the exact MP for Brothers Reunited. We can at least use High Altitude, but our opponent pings back from Ziska and Raymarsh, and uses their hero art to bring back Alex Wesker, activating Raymarsh's effect to destroy one of our Liliths. We'll try to buff our Lilith to destroy Raymarsh while we still can, but our opponent can use Dreadful to destroy Satsuki, buffing Raymarsh even further. At the very least, they're off Dreadful. We'll play down our Satsuki, and while we have the opportunity, we will try to put on lethal using our hero art and personality import. If they can't stop it, but they can, we would have had lethal. We are totally punished right there, but at the very least we have one more high altitude impact that we can use. We bring ourselves down to 2 HP, and moments before our opponent can finish us off thanks to rush and agility, we get in lethal for game 2. Game 3, we are playing the same player again. We have another rematch. Hopefully they don't remember how we win games. We'll start things off with Satsuki, and our opponent will play Fong, which will trade pretty well with her unless we buff her with Hunger for Power. We already have Vergil in hand, so I'm trying to keep anything on board I can to potentially ascend him. Our opponent will stop us from doing that though by playing Verdi and Satsuki in the top lane. We will block Satsuki with Josie Kuroda and play another Satsuki, which our opponent will defeat with Fong. We'll play Josie Kuroda in the middle lane. Our opponent will activate Land of Light. We'll respond with Natural Fanatic. Our opponent will respond with Jolt. Not sure how they got that. They must have exploited it at some point. We'll respond with High Altitude Attack, which will let our opponent add one card back to their hand. They will reborn the monster, getting Fong back to the field, and they will get in a bit of direct damage. We'll play Lilith in front of their stronger Fong, and they will eat her with Spike Dive Bomb. We'll play another Lilith to defeat their Fong, and they will reborn the monster again, bringing back another Fong. Our opponent will activate Collapse of Negotiations, and it's at this point that I actually realize they are playing red-black. We will play our Rush Satsuki to get in a bit of direct damage, and our opponent will use Aid to Rebellion to destroy her and Art Charge in the process. They are up to 18 AP, so they have another Dive Bomb online. At this point, now that I realize they're dual color, I can wait to even our MP when I feel like it. They will destroy our Lilith that we played in front of their Satsuki, and they will activate another Rite of Initiation to add either Fong or Satsuki back to their hand. They have a Satsuki on field that will get in 4 direct. We charge up for Fong to try and see if we can play our Vergil. We're pretty far behind on board at this point. We are able to finally land our Vergil, and we will use Senku to protect them from any nonsense our opponent could have. Any Spike Dive Bombs or anything. They will use Rite of Rebirth to turn Satsuki into Satsuki when she dies, and they will play an April down in front of her. We will buff our Vergil while we still can safely, and we will bring ourselves down to 7 HP. Our opponent will use Dive Bomb in front of Vergil, which could defeat him, but our Senku is off cooldown just in time, and we have just enough MP to block Rocky. We get in for more direct. We get them down to 6 HP. We are still at 7, and we will see if we can seal up the game playing Seth without ascending him at 5 attack. We can use Personality Import. Our opponent will use Mortal Enemies, which will do a lot of damage, but it is not enough to stop us from getting in just the same way as the first time and taking game 3. Here we are again, and this deck is just a blast. Every game is tense and down to the wire, and you pretty much have the potential to take games off of anybody. Assuming we draw the right cards. This deck is not super consistent, but it is so much fun that I recommend it very highly regardless. As far as matchups go, red is probably our easiest matchup since they have no in-color way to stop our combo. Our games against green will pretty much be decided in the first 30 seconds. Against growth, you will either break their opening board with Lilith and Seth, or you will lose right then. Big green is pretty much exactly the same. If we can get a unit above 6 HP, the alligator they play will probably die on hit, but if they are able to get that hit, beating the alligator is very difficult. And the elephant in the room for red and green, Kikosho is really difficult to beat in this deck. Unless we just totally cheese them at the very start, Kikosho is just too efficient to beat with this deck. Against purple, we are usually able to do our game plan uninterrupted, unless they are playing Gen or Mirage Decor. Those two things will give our deck a lot of trouble. Otherwise, purple is very doable. Last of all, black is absolutely an even skill matchup. As you saw in game 2, they have lots of ways to get us off our combo, but if we keep the pressure on, we can beat them. Raging Demon in particular is difficult, but if you keep them off of their demon and run them out of at least 2 Ganados, you have a chance of beating RD. I would recommend the deck to anybody who wants a fast-paced deck with the potential for massive pop-offs. As for the next episode, please let me know down below what decks you're excited to play in the upcoming Mission of Repetence format. And let me know what you thought of this episode as well. I had a blast making this episode, and I'm hoping to have something like a pack opening shortly after Mission of Repetence drops. Please like the video if you liked the video, subscribe if you subscribed. Once again, I'm Sconchulus, and I will see you in the next one.